Hello! Welcome. Welcome. Sunday night, Monday morning, Monday afternoon. It's a time zone for you.
6 days before the wedding, I found her birth control in her purse. We were trying to get pregnant. Said she stopped a year ago. I asked nothing. Just made a copy of her texts while she was in the shower. She told her friend she was just doing her duty. I let her walk to the altar. Alone. Listen, I thought I knew everything about Vanessa after 3 years together. We had this whole plan mapped out. Get married, honeymoon in Bali, then start trying for kids immediately. She was the one pushing for it actually, always talking about how she couldn't wait to be a mom, how we needed to get started before she turned 30. The biological clock thing, you know how it is. So there I was last Tuesday, 6 days before our wedding, helping her pack for our bachelor and bachelorette parties. She asked me to grab her phone charger from her purse while she was organizing her makeup. Simple enough request, right? I'm digging through this massive bag of hers. Seriously, women carry entire pharmacies in those things. When my fingers hit this small plastic case. Birth control pills. A full pack, clearly being used regularly based on the missing tablets. The prescription date was from last month. My brain just stopped working for a second. We've been trying to get pregnant for a year. She told me she went off the pill 13 months ago. We had conversations about ovulation schedules, prenatal vitamins, the whole 9 yards. I even switched to boxer shorts because she read somewhere that briefs could affect sperm count. I started taking those expensive fertility vitamins that tasted like chalk. The worst part was how normal everything felt in that moment. She was humming in the bathroom, sorting through lipsticks, completely oblivious that I was standing there holding evidence that our entire relationship was built on lies. I put the pills back exactly where I found them and handed her the charger with a smile that felt like it might crack my face in half. That night, while she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. The password was our anniversary date. How's that for irony? I found the text thread with her best friend Claire almost immediately. The conversation from 3 weeks ago made my stomach drop through the floor. Vanessa had written, "Honestly, Claire, I'm just doing my duty at this point. The wedding's already paid for, everyone's flying in, and breaking up now would be social suicide. I'll figure out the kid thing later, maybe after we settle into married life. But right now, I can't imagine being tied down with a baby on top of everything else." Claire's response was even worse. "Girl, you're being smart. Get through the wedding. Enjoy being married for a while, then reassess. Babies change everything. At least this way you have options." There were dozens of messages like this, stretching back months. Conversations about how she wasn't ready, how she felt pressured, how she was going through the motions because it was easier than having difficult conversations. She called our relationship comfortable but not passionate, and said she was hoping marriage would change things. She told Claire that sex with me felt like a chore she had to complete, that she'd been faking enthusiasm for months. But then I found something that made the birth control discovery look like small potatoes. Messages from 2 months ago where she was asking Claire about hiring a private investigator to look into my finances. She wanted to know exactly what assets I had before we got married, what kind of alimony she might be entitled to, how community property worked in our state. She was planning the divorce before the wedding even happened. I screenshotted everything, sent them to my email, then deleted the evidence from her sent folder. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the phone. When she came out of the bathroom in her towel, asking what I wanted for dinner, I just stared at her like she was a complete stranger. Because she was. The next morning, she left for her bachelorette weekend in Vegas. Kissed me goodbye at the door, told me she loved me, reminded me not to do anything too crazy at my bachelor party. She even made a joke about coming home pregnant from all the practice we'd been having. I watched her drive away knowing that every word out of her mouth was calculated manipulation. That's when I started planning something that would make her Vegas weekend look like a church picnic. Instead of Vegas with my buddies, I spent that weekend becoming a detective in my own relationship. I called the guys and told them I had food poisoning, that they should go ahead without me. They were disappointed but understood. What they didn't understand was that I was about to uncover 3 years of systematic deception that would make a soap opera writer jealous. I started with her computer. She'd left it at home, figured she wouldn't need it for a weekend of drinking and partying. Her browser history was enlightening. Searches for how to delay pregnancy naturally, side effects of stopping birth control, signs of early pregnancy to fake. The last one hit me like a freight train carrying concrete blocks. Then I found the fertility clinic emails, not for getting pregnant, but for consultations about permanent birth control options. She'd been researching getting her tubes tied, had even scheduled a consultation for 2 weeks after our honeymoon. The appointment confirmation email was sitting right there in her inbox, dated from a month ago. The doctor's notes from her preliminary consultation were attached, discussing her concerns about feeling pressured into motherhood by her partner. But the real kicker was her journal. She kept it in her nightstand drawer, locked, but I knew she hid the key under her jewelry box because I'd seen her access it once when she thought I was asleep. 3 years of entries, and the last 18 months painted a picture of someone desperately trying to convince herself to stay in a relationship she'd outgrown. One entry from 8 months ago read, "He's a good man, stable, everything I thought I wanted when I was 25. But I feel like I'm suffocating in this suburban dream. The pregnancy pressure is getting worse every day." He talks about baby names at dinner. He's converted the spare room into a nursery in his mind. How do I tell someone who loves me so much that I don't think I love him back anymore? How do I tell him that the thought of having his children makes me want to run screaming into traffic? Another from 4 months ago was even more brutal. Saw Dr. Phillips today about the procedure. She says I should wait until after the wedding to make any permanent decisions, but I know what I want. I can't bring a child into this situation. I can't pretend to be in love for the next 50 years. The wedding is in motion, though, and backing out now would destroy both our families financially and socially. I just need to get through this performance. But then I found entries that revealed something I never saw coming. She wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to take me for everything I was worth. Detailed notes about my salary, my savings account balance, the value of my car, my retirement funds. She'd researched divorce attorneys specializing in maximizing spousal support for economically disadvantaged partners. She'd even calculated how long she'd need to stay married to qualify for maximum alimony benefits. The most recent entry, from 2 weeks before, was the final nail in the coffin. 3 more weeks, and I'll be married. I can do this. It's just a performance for 18 to 24 months. Then I can file for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. Lawrence from the firm says I should be able to get at least 40% of his assets plus substantial monthly support if I play this right. I just need to document his controlling behavior, maybe record some arguments, build a case for emotional abuse. The suburban wife act is exhausting, but it's temporary. I spent hours reading through 3 years of doubt, 3 years of her talking herself into staying with me, 3 years of elaborate planning to not just avoid the future we'd been discussing, but to financially devastate me in the process. She'd been researching apartments in other cities, exploring job opportunities across the country, even looking into changing her name after the divorce to distance herself from the whole experience. But the biggest shock was still coming. Hidden in a folder marked tax documents were bank statements for an account I didn't know existed. She'd been skimming money from our joint checking account for 2 years, moving small amounts to this secret account every month. The current balance was over $38,000. Money she'd stolen from our wedding fund, our down payment savings, our emergency fund. Sunday night, she came home from Vegas with a sunburn, stories about male strippers, and a hangover that seemed authentic. She was affectionate in a way that felt like she was overcompensating, talking about how much she'd missed me, how the weekend made her realize how much she loved our quiet life together. She curled up against me in bed and whispered about how excited she was to marry me, how she couldn't wait to start our real life together. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, planning exactly how this was going to play out. She had no idea that I was now 3 steps ahead of every move she'd planned to make. Monday through Thursday were the longest 4 days of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while orchestrating what would either be the most justified revenge in history or the most spectacular implosion of my own life. Vanessa was running around handling last-minute wedding details, completely oblivious to the fact that I was planning a counterattack that would make her divorce strategy look like amateur hour. The guest list was my starting point. 230 people, including her parents who'd flown in from Portland, my entire extended family, college friends who'd bought plane tickets months ago, co-workers who'd requested time off, and her boss who was expecting to give a toast about what a wonderful employee she was. The venue was paid for, the catering was set, the flowers were ordered. Canceling would cost us nearly $40,000 and humiliate everyone involved. But I had a much better idea. I reached out to my cousin Blake, who worked in private investigation. Told him I needed complete background checks on Vanessa run quietly, that I suspected she might be hiding financial irregularities or other issues before the wedding. Blake was expensive but thorough, and within 48 hours he had a complete picture of her life that made my own discoveries look like amateur detective work. The secret bank account was just the beginning. She had 3 credit cards I didn't know about with a combined debt of over $22,000, mostly from shopping sprees, spa treatments, and weekend trips she claimed were work conferences. She'd been seeing a therapist for 2 years, specifically discussing her plans to leave me and maximize her financial benefit from the divorce. But Blake's most shocking discovery was that she'd been in regular contact with her college boyfriend Mitchell, who lived in San Francisco. Their messages weren't just inappropriate for someone about to get married. They were evidence of a full-blown emotional affair that had been going on for 8 months. Mitchell had been sending her money to help fund her secret escape plan. He'd even put a deposit down on an apartment for her in his neighborhood. Blake also discovered that she'd already accepted a job in San Francisco, starting 3 weeks after our wedding. The company thought she was recently divorced and relocating for a fresh start. She'd given them a start date that coincided perfectly with when she was planning to file divorce papers against me. Tuesday night, she came home stressed about wedding planning and started venting about her mother's opinions on the centerpieces. I sat there nodding sympathetically while internally marveling at her ability to care about flower arrangements when she was planning to abandon the marriage before the ink dried on the certificate. She was complaining about the cost of the wedding, how expensive everything was, completely unaware that I now knew she'd been systematically stealing money from our accounts to fund her exit strategy. Wednesday, I made my own appointments. First with a lawyer who walked me through the implications of calling off a wedding this close to the date, but also the legal ramifications of what Vanessa had been doing. The secret accounts, the hidden debt, the financial deception, it was all grounds for serious legal action. Then with our venue coordinator, our caterer, and our photographer. I didn't cancel anything, but I got all the information I needed about their policies and procedures. But my most important appointment was with a different private investigator, one who specialized in financial crimes. I wanted documentation of every dollar she'd moved, every account she'd opened, every debt she'd hidden. If she wanted to play financial hardball, I was going to make sure I had better equipment. Wednesday night, I made a decision that even now seems crazy. Instead of confronting her privately or calling off the wedding quietly, I was going to let her walk down that aisle and face the consequences of her choices in front of everyone who mattered to both of us. She'd been planning to humiliate me with divorce papers and false abuse allegations. I was going to give her a taste of public humiliation first. Thursday night was the rehearsal dinner. 50 people gathered at an upscale restaurant downtown to celebrate our upcoming union. Vanessa gave a beautiful speech about how grateful she was to have found her soulmate, how she couldn't wait to build a life together, how this was just the beginning of our greatest adventure. She talked about the children we'd have, the house we'd buy, the future we'd build together. Her parents toasted to our future children. My parents talked about how proud they were to welcome Vanessa into the family. Friends shared stories about our relationship, about how perfect we were together, about how they'd never seen two people more meant for each other. Her maid of honor, Claire, gave a speech about true love conquering all obstacles. I played my part perfectly, giving my own speech about how lucky I was, how excited I was for tomorrow, how Vanessa had made me the happiest man alive. I thanked her parents for raising such an amazing daughter, thanked her friends for supporting our relationship, thanked everyone for being part of our special day. The irony was suffocating, but I maintained the facade because I knew it would make what happened next even more devastating. That night, she fell asleep early, exhausted from the emotional weight of lying to 50 people about her feelings. I stayed up until 3 in the morning, making final preparations for what would be the most dramatic wedding day in our social circle's history. I prepared copies of documents, organized evidence, and rehearsed exactly what I was going to say. Everything was ready. Tomorrow, Vanessa was going to learn that sometimes the person you're trying to manipulate is already 10 steps ahead of you. Saturday morning dawned perfect and sunny, like the universe had a twisted sense of humor about the whole situation. Vanessa woke up nervous but excited, chattering about how this was the day we'd been planning for years, how everything was going to be perfect. She had no idea it was also the day her entire carefully constructed plan would explode in her face. The bridal suite at the venue was buzzing with activity by 9 a.m. Vanessa's mother, 3 bridesmaids, a professional hair and makeup team, and a photographer were transforming her into the picture-perfect bride. I watched from the groom's suite as she posed for photos, laughing and glowing, completely immersed in the performance of being the happiest woman alive. At 10:30, I received a text from Blake with the final piece of information I'd been waiting for. Mitchell was already in town. He'd flown in yesterday and was staying at a hotel 15 minutes from our venue. According to his credit card records, he'd bought a plane ticket for Vanessa departing Sunday morning to San Francisco. She was planning to leave me at the altar metaphorically and literally. At 11:15, 15 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start, I asked my best man Peter to deliver an envelope to Vanessa. Inside were printouts of every text message, every journal entry, every bank statement, every piece of evidence I'd collected over the past week, along with a single note. I know about Mitchell. I know about San Francisco. I know about the money. The choice is yours. Confess to everyone here and now, or wait for me to do it at the altar. You have 5 minutes to decide. Peter came back 20 minutes later looking confused and concerned. He said Vanessa had gone completely white after reading the envelope, locked herself in the bathroom, and was refusing to come out. Her bridesmaids were panicking, thinking she had food poisoning or severe wedding nerves. Her mother was demanding to know what was in the envelope, but Peter told her I'd said it was just a love letter. 12:15, 15 minutes after the ceremony was supposed to start, my phone buzzed with a text from her. Please don't do this. We can work this out after. I'll explain everything. Just get through today, and we can figure this out privately. I texted back. You had 3 years to be honest with me. You chose deception every single day. See you at the altar. She responded immediately. I'll give you back every penny. I'll call off San Francisco. Just please don't humiliate me in front of everyone. My final text was simple. You were planning to humiliate me with false abuse allegations and divorce papers. This is just returning the favor. The wedding march started at 12:30. I took my position at the front of the church, looking out at 230 people who had no idea they were about to witness the most epic public revelation in wedding history. Vanessa's family looked concerned but hopeful. My family was beaming with pride. Her boss was checking his watch, probably thinking about the toast he'd prepared. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their lavender dresses, all smiles and grace. Claire, the maid of honor, looked nervous, which made perfect sense since she'd been complicit in the deception for months. Then the music changed to the traditional bridal march. Vanessa appeared at the back of the church in her grandmother's vintage dress, looking absolutely stunning and absolutely terrified. She walked down that aisle alone because her father had passed away years earlier, every step bringing her closer to the moment when her entire world would collapse. I could see her hands shaking as she gripped her bouquet. When she reached the altar, I could see tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of joy. The officiant, Reverend Thompson, began the ceremony with the traditional opening about gathering together in the sight of God and witnesses to join two people in holy matrimony. He talked about love, commitment, and the sacred bond of marriage. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. The church fell silent. This is usually a formality, a dramatic pause before moving on to the vows. Instead, I stepped forward and turned to face the congregation. I do, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church. I have several reasons, actually. The gasps started immediately. Vanessa grabbed my arm, whispered, please don't, so quietly only I could hear it. Her mother stood up in the front row looking panicked. The officiant looked like he'd never encountered this situation in 30 years of performing weddings. I pulled out my phone and began reading directly from her text messages to Claire. The church was dead silent except for my voice recounting her exact words about doing her duty, about not being ready for children, about planning an exit strategy after the wedding. I read her messages about researching divorce attorneys and maximizing alimony payments. Halfway through the first message, Vanessa broke down completely. She collapsed into the chair that had been placed beside the altar for elderly relatives, sobbing uncontrollably. Her mother rushed forward, demanding to know what was happening, but I held up my hand and continued reading. I moved on to the journal entries about feeling suffocated, about researching divorce lawyers, about the fertility clinic appointment to get her tubes tied. I read her calculations about my assets and her plans to document fake emotional abuse. I described the secret bank account and the $38,000 she'd stolen from our joint savings. By this point, the church was in complete chaos. Her mother was screaming at me for humiliating her daughter. My mother was crying, asking if any of it was true. Friends were pulling out their phones to record what was happening. Several people had already left, unable to handle the secondhand embarrassment. But I wasn't finished. I announced that Mitchell, her college boyfriend, was currently staying at the Hampton Inn downtown, waiting for her to join him on a flight to San Francisco tomorrow morning, where she'd already accepted a job and where he'd already put a deposit down on an apartment for them. I read some of their more intimate text messages, the ones where they talked about being together once she was free from her suburban prison. The church erupted. People were shouting, crying, demanding explanations. Vanessa's college friends looked shocked. My friends looked furious. The wedding photographer was still taking pictures, probably figuring this would be the most dramatic wedding album in history. Vanessa finally stood up, makeup completely destroyed, mascara streaking down her cheeks, and faced the congregation. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "It's all true. Every word. I never wanted this. I never wanted him. I'm sorry." Then she ran, straight down the center aisle in her wedding dress, past shocked guests, past her sobbing mother, past the bridesmaids who were trying to process what they'd just witnessed. She burst through the church doors and disappeared into the parking lot. But the drama wasn't over. Claire, her maid of honor and accomplice, stood up and pointed at me. "You're a monster," she shouted. She was trying to do the right thing. She was scared of you, scared of how you'd react if she told the truth. I pulled out another piece of paper. "Actually, Claire, let me read some of your responses to her messages. The ones where you encouraged her to play the long game and maximize the payout. The ones where you helped her research divorce attorneys and suggested she document fake instances of emotional abuse." Claire went white and sat down without another word. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Her mother tried to salvage the situation by claiming pre-wedding nerves and demanding that everyone forget what they'd heard. But too many people had witnessed too much truth. The reception was canceled, guests awkwardly filed out, and I spent the rest of the day fielding phone calls from relatives demanding explanations and friends expressing their shock and support. Vanessa disappeared for a week. When she finally resurfaced, it was through a lawyer who demanded I not contact her directly and who threatened legal action for public humiliation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawyer also demanded the return of her grandmother's wedding dress, which she'd abandoned in her flight from the church. But my lawyer was better prepared. We had documentation of financial fraud, theft, and breach of fiduciary duty. We had evidence of her plans to commit perjury in divorce proceedings. Her threats of legal action evaporated pretty quickly when she realized I had enough evidence to pursue criminal charges. She moved to San Francisco 3 weeks later, took that job she'd secretly accepted, and started her new life with Mitchell. But her escape plan wasn't as smooth as she'd hoped. The financial investigation I'd commissioned revealed enough irregularities that her new employer conducted their own background check. When they discovered she'd lied about being divorced and had misrepresented her employment history, they rescinded the job offer. Mitchell, it turned out, wasn't as committed to their relationship when it came with legal and financial complications. He broke up with her 2 months later, leaving her stranded in San Francisco with no job, no support system, and a pile of legal bills from trying to fight my claims against the stolen money. The legal battles took 8 months to resolve. In the end, she was required to return every penny she'd stolen, plus interest and legal fees. The credit card debt she'd hidden became her sole responsibility. She had to declare bankruptcy within a year of our non-wedding. But the social consequences were even more devastating than the financial ones. Word spread quickly through our social circle, and then through social media. The story of the bride who was exposed at the altar became local legend. Her reputation was destroyed, her family relationships were strained, and several friendships ended when people realized they'd been unknowingly complicit in her deception. 2 years later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was working as a receptionist in Portland, living with her parents, and still single. The elaborate escape plan that was supposed to set her up for a comfortable new life had instead left her worse off than if she'd just been honest from the beginning. As for me, the whole experience taught me that sometimes the most painful truth is still better than the most comfortable lie. I'm now engaged to someone who actually wants to build a life with me, someone who talks through her concerns instead of secretly planning my destruction, someone who sees our relationship as a partnership instead of a financial opportunity. The wedding that never happened cost me about $30,000 in the end, but it saved me from years of living with someone who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone to something better. The public humiliation was brutal for both of us, but it was also honest in a way our entire relationship had never been. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be anyone's victim, even when it means burning everything down to get to the truth. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.